Hey everyone, Sarah here. Rewind Justice brings you revenge stories that will blow your mind. If you're ready, hit subscribe and let's go.
My name is Renata Ose-Mensah. I am 27 years old. I am a junior associate at Callahan Whitmore, a mid-size accounting firm on Peachtree Street in Atlanta, Georgia. I specialize in forensic accounting. I trace money for a living, where it went, who moved it, and why the numbers on one document don't match the numbers on another. I did not choose this field by accident. I want to be direct with you about that. My father's name is Bernard Ose-Mensah. He is 59 years old, and for most of my childhood he ran a mid-size electrical contracting company called Ose and Sons out of a brick building on Industrial Boulevard in Marietta, Georgia. He has large hands and a loud laugh and an absolute conviction, held since before I was born, that the resources of a family flow in a single direction. Toward the sons, I have one brother. His name is Kofi. Kofi is 31. Kofi is charming and impulsive and has the particular confidence of someone who has never been told that the world does not automatically owe him its full attention. He played football in high school. He did not play in college, but my father speaks about his high school career the way other men speak about military service. With reverence, with detail, with a specific kind of love that I recognized early as having nothing to do with me. My mother, Abina, is 54. She is a school librarian at Chamblee Charter High School in DeKalb County. She is gentle and tired in the specific way of women who have spent decades absorbing the weight of a household without being thanked for it. She loves me. I know she loves me. She has also, for her entire marriage, deferred to my father on every financial decision without exception. This matters. I will come back to it. The education savings account was opened in 1998, the year I started kindergarten. My maternal grandmother, her name was Cecile Addo, and she died when I was 16, and I still miss her every single week, contributed $15,000 as the seed amount. She told me about it herself the Christmas I turned 8 in the kitchen of her house in Stone Mountain, Georgia, while she was making rice and stew and I was sitting on the counter eating a piece of coconut bread. She said, "Renata, I put money aside for your college. It's in a savings account with your father. Promise me you'll go to school." I promised her. She died 8 years later. She never knew what happened to the money. My father added to the account over the years, or said he did. The statements which he received and filed and never showed either of us children, reflected steady growth through my middle school years. By the time I started high school, the fund held approximately $68,000. I know this because I eventually found the statements. I will get to that. I graduated high school in 2015 with a 4.1 GPA and an acceptance letter from Spelman College in Atlanta. Spelman offered me a partial merit scholarship, $12,000 per year. The remaining costs, tuition, housing, fees, ran approximately $28,000 annually. My father sat me down the summer before my freshman year. He said the education fund would cover the gap. He said he had been building it for exactly this purpose. He said Grandma Cecile would be proud. He looked me in the eye when he said all of this. I believed him. I went to Spelman. I studied accounting. I worked 20 hours a week at the campus library to cover my personal expenses because my father said the fund needed to be preserved carefully and could only release a certain amount per semester. I ate dining hall food for 4 years. I did not study abroad because my father said the fund didn't stretch to international programs. I graduated in May 2019. I had a 3.88 GPA and a job offer from Callahan Whitmore, which I had earned through a summer internship the year before. I also had $31,000 in student loans. Not from the education fund. From FAFSA. From federal direct loans I had taken because every semester when I'd asked my father about the fund disbursements, he had said the amount was already factored in and my aid package was taking care of the rest. I never saw a single disbursement record. I was 22 years old and tired and proud, and I had a job, and I told myself the loans were manageable and I would sort out the details later. I did not sort them out immediately, but I did not forget them. The summer after graduation I moved into a studio apartment in Decatur, Georgia, 12 minutes from my parents' house. I started at Callahan Whitmore in August. I was making $52,000 a year. The loan payments were $340 a month. I was fine. Tight but fine. That October my brother Kofi came home. He had been in Charlotte for 2 years managing, and I use that word loosely, a sports bar franchise that my father had co-signed a $175,000 small business loan to help him open. The bar had not done well. The loan was in default. Kofi arrived at my parents' house with a duffel bag and a story about the Charlotte market and a plan for a new venture that my father was already nodding along to before Kofi had finished explaining it. I sat at that dinner table and watched my father look at my brother the way he used to look at those high school football games. I went home and I could not sleep. Not because of jealousy. I want to be precise. It was not jealousy. It was something more structural. A feeling like standing in a room and finally being able to name the shape of it. Like the architecture of what had happened to me was finally becoming visible. I opened my laptop. I opened the proprietary database access my firm had given me for professional use. I typed in my father's name. What I found over the next 6 weeks was this. The Education Savings Account, account number ending in 4471 at First National Community Bank in Marietta, Georgia, had held $68,400 in January 2015. By August 2015, the month I began my freshman year at Spelman, the balance was $1,200. The $67,200 difference had been transferred in 4 separate transactions between March and July of 2015, all to a business account registered to Osei and Sons Electrical Contracting LLC. The Osei and Sons account had then, in September 2015, disbursed $67,000 to a second LC, KO Ventures, registered in the state of Georgia to one Kofi Amos Osamensa. KO Ventures, I found, had been established in August 2015. The same month I moved into my Spelman dormitory, with my father as co-signer on its initial business credit line. KO Ventures had dissolved in 2017, having generated $0 in documented revenue. I sat at my desk at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday in November 2019 and I looked at those numbers for a very long time. I thought about Grandma Cecile in her kitchen. The coconut bread. Promise me you'll go to school. I thought about the library job. 4 years, 20 hours a week. I thought about $31,000 in student loans. I thought about my father looking me in the eye. I opened a new folder on my desktop. I labeled it 3 words. I need to tell you about the 18 months that followed. This is where I almost stopped. I was building a file. Slowly, carefully, the way I had been trained to do professionally. Source documents, cross-referenced records, a clean chain of custody for every item. I had 8 items by January 2020. I had 19 by June. I had what Callahan Whitmore's senior forensic partner, a man named Douglas Pritchard, would later describe as a textbook paper trail by the spring of 2021. But in the middle of all of that, in March of 2020 specifically, my firm went to reduced hours. The pandemic. My salary was cut to 80%. My loan payments did not reduce. I had $4,100 in my savings account and rent due and a paper trail that I was building on my own time with no certainty it would ever lead anywhere. Thought about calling my father. Not to confront him. To ask for help. To say, I'm struggling. I know what you did. Can we figure this out? I thought about this for approximately 3 weeks. I thought about Grandma Cecile. I thought about KO Ventures. $0 in documented revenue. My father's signature on the cosign line. I did not call him. I picked up a second job, weekend bookkeeping for a restaurant group in Midtown Atlanta. I paid my rent. I kept building the file. I labeled each new item with a date and a source and a 1-sentence description of what it proved. By March 2022, 2.5 years after I started, I had 31 items. I called Douglas Pritchard. Douglas Pritchard is 62 years old and has been a forensic CPA for 34 years. He has testified as an expert witness in federal court 11 times. He is not a warm man. He is precise and he is fair, and when he looked at my 31 items over the course of 2 hours on a Thursday afternoon in the Callahan Whitmore conference room, he was completely silent. When he finished, he set the last document down. He took off his reading glasses. He said, "How long did it take you to build this?" I said, 2.5 years. He said, "Do you understand what you have here?" I said I thought I did. He said, "I want to make sure." He picked up the primary transfer record, the $67,200 movement from my education account to Osei and Sons. He set it next to the KAO Ventures registration document. He set both of those next to the email I had found. A thread between my father and his bank officer, in which my father referred to the education account as Renata's fund and requested the transfer be processed as an internal business reallocation. He tapped all 3 documents with one finger. He said, he named it Renata's fund in the transfer request. Then he moved it. Then he used it to capitalize your brother's business. He paused. That's not a misunderstanding. That's not a family decision. That has a name. I said, wire fraud. He said, at minimum. He looked at me for a moment. He said, I'll sign the report. Drop an A, B, or C in the comments right now. If you've ever discovered a financial betrayal in your own family. B, if you've ever built a file like this one. Not the actual folder but the mental one. See if you've ever almost stopped and didn't. I need to know who's in this room with me. My father called a family meeting. He did this in September 2022. He did not know about the file. He did not know about Douglas Pritchard. He did not know that the 31 items in my in-case of folder were now the basis of a formal forensic report bearing an expert signature and a 34-year professional credential. He called the meeting because Kofi had a new plan. The plan was a logistics company. Kofi had been working for a trucking firm in Atlanta for the past year and had decided, after 11 months on the job, that he understood the industry well enough to own his own operation. He needed startup capital. He had done some research. He had a number in mind. The number was $85,000. My father had not been able to secure a business loan since the KO Ventures default. His credit was damaged. He needed a co-signer. He wanted it to be me. The meeting was at my parents' house in Marietta on a Sunday afternoon in late September. My mother made jollof rice and chicken because she always makes jollof rice and chicken when she is nervous about something. The smell of it filled the whole first floor and I stood in the kitchen for a few minutes when I arrived, watching her stir the pot, and I thought about every Sunday in this house and every time I had sat at this table. Kofi was already there. He was on the back porch with my father reviewing something on a laptop. I heard them laughing when I pulled into the driveway. We sat down at 4 o'clock. My father was in a good mood. This is important to note. He was relaxed, he was smiling, he passed the food and made a joke about the chicken being better than last week's and my mother laughed and Kofi laughed and I watched all of it. Then my father set his fork down. He folded his hands. He looked at me across the table. He said, "We want to talk to you about a business opportunity." He laid out the logistics company plan. He explained Kofi's experience. He described the market. He used the word family 11 times in the first 4 minutes. I counted. Then he said, "We need a co-signer. Someone with clean credit and a stable income. You've done well, Renata. You've built something. And now we need you to be part of building something for all of us." I looked at him. I said, "I want to talk about my college fund first." The table went quiet. My father's expression shifted. Not dramatically. A small tightening around the eyes. The specific recalibration of a man who has been asked an unexpected question and is deciding in real time how to answer it. He said, "What about it?" I said, "I want to understand where it went." He said, "Renata, that was years ago. We made some adjustments. Things were tight. It was a family decision." He picked up his fork again. "Your loans aren't that bad. You've managed fine." I said, $67,000. He set his fork back down. I said, "That's how much was in the account when I started at Spellman. It was there in January 2015. By August 2015 it was gone. It went to Osei & Sons. And from Osei & Sons it went to KO Ventures. Kofi's company. The one that dissolved 2 years later with zero documented revenue." The room was completely silent. My mother had stopped moving. Kofi was looking at the table. My father said, "Where did you get that?" Not a question. A statement. The specific sentence structure of a man who has just understood that the room he thought he controlled has changed shape around him. I said, "I'm a forensic accountant, Dad. I trace money for a living." I reached into the bag I had set beside my chair. I took out the manila envelope. I set it on the table in front of my father. I said, "Douglas Pritchard signed the report. He's been a forensic CPA for 34 years. He's testified as an expert witness in federal court 11 times. His name and contact information are on the cover page." My father did not open the envelope. He looked at it. He looked at me. I said. The transfer request that moved the money names the account as Renata's fund. You used that phrase yourself in writing in an email to your bank officer. Then you moved the money to capitalize Kofi's business. I paused. Douglas told me what that has a name. Would you like me to explain what wire fraud means, or would you like to read the report first? My father's hands were on the table. Both of them flat. Both of them very still. And then they started shaking. It was a small movement. Not dramatic. Not the way it happens in a film where someone knocks over a glass or pushes back from the table. It was just a fine, contained tremor. The kind that happens when a body is absorbing something it cannot fully process. His fingers. His wrists. He is 59 years old and I have known him my entire life and I have never seen his hands shake before. I want to be honest with you. I did not feel triumph. I have thought about that moment many times since and I have tried to name what I actually felt and the closest I can get is accurate. Like a calculation that had been running for 2.5 years had just resolved to its correct answer. Kofi said, "Dad." My father said nothing. My mother said very quietly, "Bernard." He picked up the envelope. His hands were still shaking. He did not open it. He set it back down. He said, This is not the whole picture, Renata. There are things you don't understand about that period. The business was struggling. Your brother needed. I said, I understand the business was struggling. I also understand that the account held Grandma Cecile's money. $15,000 she put in when I was 5 years old. She told me about it herself. She made me promise I'd go to school. He stopped talking. I said, I went to school. I worked 20 hours a week. I took $31,000 in loans. And you used Grandma's money to fund Kofi's bar. My mother made a sound I had never heard from her before. Not a word. A sound. Short and involuntary. I looked at her. I said, I'm sorry, Mom. I know this is hard. He was looking at my father. Not at me. He was looking at the envelope. Douglas Pritchard was in a car in the driveway. I had asked him to come. I had told him he might not be needed, that the envelope alone might be sufficient. He had said, I'll be there. You shouldn't be alone in that room. He had driven from Buckhead and parked and waited and not come in unless I texted him. I texted him one word. Now. He knocked on the front door 2 minutes later. My father opened it. He looked at Douglas Pritchard the way a man looks at something he has been dreading for a long time. Douglas stepped inside. He was carrying his own copy of the report. He set it on the table. He put on his reading glasses. He said, Mr. Osemensa. My name is Douglas Pritchard. I'm a forensic CPA and I've reviewed the financial records your daughter assembled. I want to walk through 3 specific documents with you if that's all right. He did not wait for confirmation. He opened the report to the first flagged page. He said, This is the transfer authorization dated March 14, 2015. Your signature. The account described as Renata's fund. The receiving account, Osei and Sons. He turned to the second flagged page. This is the disbursement record from Osei and Sons to KO Ventures, dated September 3, 2015. 6 days after your daughter moved into her college dormitory. He turned to the third page. This is the KO Ventures dissolution filing dated April 2017. Total documented revenue, 0. He set the report down. He said, I've testified as an expert witness 11 times in federal proceedings. In my professional assessment, this constitutes an unauthorized diversion of designated funds. The specific framing of the transfer request, naming the account in your own words, significantly complicates any claim of misunderstanding. He paused. Shall I explain what that exposure looks like, or would you prefer to have your own attorney review the report first? My father said, I need to call someone. Douglas said, that would be advisable. Type strength in the comments if you've ever had to be the most composed person in a room that you had every right to fall apart in. Because that Sunday in Marietta was the hardest sitting still I've ever done. Keep going with me. My father called his attorney that evening. His attorney's name is Warren Kessler, and he has been handling Osei and Sons legal matters since 2004. And when Warren Kessler read Douglas Pritchard's report, he called my father back in 40 minutes and said, according to what my father told my mother, which my mother told me, that the situation was serious and they needed to discuss their options immediately. I know this because my mother called me that night. She said, Renata. Long pause. Your father is very upset. I said, I know. She said, he says he was going to pay it back. That it was always meant to come back to you. I said, Mom. The account was empty the day I moved into my dorm. Kofi's company dissolved 2 years later. Nothing came back. Another long pause. She said, I didn't know the details. I want you to know that. I knew things were difficult with the business. I didn't know the specifics. I believed her. I still believe her. I said, I know, Mom. She said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to wait and see what he does first. My father did not call me for 11 days. On the 12th day he called and asked if we could meet. Privately. Just the two of us. We met at a coffee shop on Roswell Road in Marietta. A place called Brood Grounds that we used to go to when I was in high school on Saturday mornings before the distance between us had fully calcified. He was there when I arrived. He had ordered my usual. He looked like he had not slept well in almost 2 weeks. He said, I owe you an apology. I said nothing. I waited. He said, I made a decision I shouldn't have made. I told myself Kofi needed it more. I told myself you had your scholarship. I told myself I'd replace it. He looked at his coffee cup. I kept telling myself that. And then years went by and it felt like too much time had passed to bring it up and he stopped. I said, you looked me in the eye. The summer before Spelman. You told me Grandma Cecile's money was there. You said she would be proud. He closed his eyes. He said, I know. I said, I need you to hear something. Not because I want to punish you. Because it's true. I waited until he looked at me. I ate dining hall food for 4 years because I was trying to preserve the fund I didn't know was gone. I didn't study abroad. I worked 20 hours a week at the library. I graduated with $31,000 in debt from money I didn't need to borrow. And Grandma Cecile, she made me promise. She told me herself. She died thinking she'd kept that promise. He was crying by the end of that. Quietly. Looking at the table. I did not comfort him. Not because I am cold. Because comfort in that moment would have been a kindness that asked him to feel less of what he needed to feel. I let him sit with it. 3 weeks after the Marietta meeting, my father's attorney contacted Douglas Pritchard with a proposal. The proposal was a private restitution agreement. Full repayment of the $67,200, structured over 4 years, with the first payment due within 60 days. In exchange, no referral to federal authorities, no civil suit, no further action. Douglas called me. He presented the terms. He said it was my decision entirely. I asked him one question, is the agreement enforceable? He said yes. Fully documented, notarized, legally binding. I said, draft it. The agreement was signed on a Tuesday morning in October 2022, in the conference room at Abernethy. Douglas had recommended a neutral third-party office. My father signed first. He did not look at me when he signed. He looked at the document. I signed second. I looked at him. I said, I want you to know I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because Grandma Cecile put that money there for me and I'm going to make sure it comes back. He nodded. Once more. I said, and I'm not co-signing anything for Kofi. Not now. Not ever. I want that understood. He said, understood. I picked up my copy of the agreement. I put it in my bag. I stood up. I was the first one to leave the room. Before the last part, type never again in the comments if you know exactly what it means to leave a room first. You'll understand why that mattered. Stay with me. The first restitution payment arrived on a Thursday in December 2022. Direct deposit $1,400 from a personal account I had not seen before. Labeled in the memo field, Restitution. R. I sat at my kitchen table in my apartment in Decatur and I looked at it for a long time. I thought about Grandma Cecile's kitchen. The rice. The stew. The coconut bread and the counter and the 8-year-old girl who made a promise. I transferred $1,400 directly to my student loan servicer. I did that every month. Every payment that came in, I applied it directly to the loans. Not to savings. Not to anything else. Specifically, deliberately, to the debt I should never have owed. My mother and I have dinner now every few weeks. She drives to Decatur or I drive to Marietta and we sit in her kitchen and she makes something and we talk carefully about things that are not my father and my brother. Sometimes we talk about Grandma Cecile. He tells me things about her that I didn't know. Small things, stories from before I was born. Last month she told me that Grandma Cecile had worked 2 jobs the year she put the $15,000 into the account. A school cafeteria job and a weekend cleaning service. Both so that I would have something. I couldn't speak for a few minutes after she told me that. My mother took my hand across the table. She held it. She said, "She knew you'd keep your promise." My father and I are in an in-between place. He calls on Sundays now. Not every Sunday. Most. The calls are short, 15 minutes, sometimes 20. We talk about his business, which is smaller now than it was. We talk about the Braves. We do not talk about the agreement or the report or the meeting in Marietta. What happened is embedded in the architecture of our relationship like a structural repair. You can see where the damage was. You can see where the work was done. The building stands. Whether it is the same building, I am still deciding. Kofi and I do not speak. That is his choice, not mine. He has not apologized. I did not ask for an apology. What I asked for was accountability, and accountability arrived in the form of 4 years of direct deposits, and Kofi is not on that agreement. He was never on any of it. That is its own kind of answer. In February 2023, I made the final payment on my student loans. It was a Tuesday evening. I was at my kitchen table. I logged into my loan servicer account and I transferred $847, the remaining balance, and I pressed confirm and I watched the screen update to 0. I did not celebrate. I sat with it for a while. Then I opened a new folder on my laptop. I moved the incasive folder inside it. I labeled the new folder. Done. I closed the laptop. I went to bed. I slept. I work at Callahan Whitmore on Peachtree Street. I have been there 4 years now and I am good at what I do. Earlier this year, Douglas Pritchard recommended me for a senior associate position, the youngest in the firm's history to be considered. I have not told my parents about it yet. I will tell my mother on Sunday. My apartment in Decatur has a back porch. It is small, 2 chairs and a planter I have been trying to grow basil in with limited success. On weekend mornings I sit on that porch with coffee and I read or I just sit. The neighborhood is quiet in the mornings. Last Saturday a woman walked by with a dog that stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked up at me with great seriousness. I looked back at it. She said, "Sorry, he does this." I said it was fine. It was fine. Everything now is specifically mine. My name is Renata Osei-Mensah. I am 27 years old. I trace money for a living. I'm very good at it. Type free in the comments if this one found you. And if you want more, subscribe. Only if it genuinely connects.